What are we discussing on today's podcast, you ask? Well, we got to break down game two victory over the Colorado Rockies, preview game three against Colorado, and then was the Daulton Varsho trade the best trade in Mike Hazen's history as the D-backs GM? Breaking it all down on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day listening to the always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreativeThomas24 from my personal account, or just look up Locked on Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms. So please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube. So please hit subscribe on the Locked on Diamondbacks YouTube channel. But for today's podcast, I first want to start off today's show by talking about the D-backs game two victory over the Colorado Rockies, because I was able to witness this game in person. The D-backs took down the Colorado Rockies 5-1. The D-backs are now 32-23 on the season. They're still in second place in the NL West, a game and a half of the LA Dodgers, because it feels like the D-backs win on the same days the Dodgers win and lose on the same days the Dodgers lose. And the D-backs have been neck and neck with the Dodgers all season, which you have to be proud of and surprised by if you're a D-backs fan, because I don't think on May 30th you would have expected the D-backs to be neck and neck with the Dodgers. And actually, after last night's game, at the time of you guys recording this, victory over the Colorado Rockies, the D-backs are actually tied with the Atlanta Braves for the second best record in the National League, if you could believe that. So the D-backs might be number two in their division and number two in their conference after D-backs win game three against the Rockies and the Atlanta Braves lose tomorrow or today at the time of you guys listening to this. The D-backs will move ahead of the Braves in the standings and have the second best record in the National League, if you can believe that. So what happened in game two against the Colorado Rockies that gave the D-backs their victory? Well, like I said, I was in person for game two, and I got the full Corbin barrels experience, because Corbin Carroll was the star of this game, and he's done something that not a lot of people have done, where he had multiple stolen bases, a home run. Corbin Carroll just did a little bit of everything in this game. He had two stolen bases, which came in the same sequence, and he essentially scored a run by himself because excuse me, he got on first base and then he stole first and second with one out. And so it's like Corbin Carroll went from first to third with one out. That's an easy run scoring opportunity with Gabriel Moreno at the plate. Moreno, easy sac fly to score Corbin barrels, who also had a big bomb in this game. It went 407 feet. That gave the D-backs their fifth run of the ball game, because the D-backs in this game offensively started really early. Ketel Marte got the game going with a pesky foul pull home run, only 358 feet, but Ketel Marte keeps his on-base streak alive. He's been playing really well this season. His slash line after the game is 281, 339, 482. Still not like elite Ketel Marte like we've seen in 2021 and 2019, but way better than the Ketel Marte we saw last season. So far, so good for Ketel Marte, who's been really impressive this year. Like I said, Corbin Carroll was a star of the game with the plays he was making offensively on the bases. He showed his power at the plate. I love watching Corbin Carroll in person, because if you sit along the first base line, you just get to watch Corbin Carroll shake his little tush at the plate. And let me tell you, ladies, it's a great sight. So for the D-backs, Corbin Carroll, good job by them. The D-backs only had 3 run scoring opportunities, if you could believe, all night. but that's because they were hitting home runs. Like I said, Marte in the first inning. Also had an Evan Longoria 2-run bomb that was 452 feet. Then Moreno in that fourth sacrifice fly. Then Corbin Carroll in the sixth with the home run that scored the D-backs 5 runs. That's all they needed tonight. They had 6 hits. It wasn't the elite D-backs offense when it's like hit after hit, run after run coming across the plate. Like they were meticulous tonight, had their 3 home runs, did it by the long ball, which is not something that the D-backs always do because they're kind of like middle of the pack in the National League when it comes to home runs. So whenever you see them win a game via the long ball, you always have to raise your eyebrow a little bit and be like, you know what? That was kind of impressive by the D-backs last night, because sometimes you need to be a little, you don't want to be home run dependent or reliant, but you need to have that. It's like an ace up your sleeve. You need to have that in your back pocket. You need to have the ability to change the game with one swing. You don't want to have to be a team that relies on it. It's like a basketball team. You don't want to have to rely on the 3-point shot to go down because it's a volatile stat, right? It's high volatility. It's a high it changes from game to game. So you're not always going to have the home runs. You're not always going to hit 3-point shots, but can you do other things? That's what the D-backs are really good at. Extra base hits, moving runners over, coming through a runner's scoring position. The D-backs don't need to hit home runs to win games. But in a game like tonight where the home run ball was their best friend, always impressive to watch it. Jake McCarthy, also impressive tonight. 2 hits in the number 9 hole. Also stole 2 bases. So you like to see Jake the Rake get back on track. Overall, very impressive win by the D-backs, who have now won the first 2 games in a 4-game set against the Colorado Rockies. And the D-backs have just kind of owned the Colorado Rockies the whole season so far. It's been a really nice matchup for the D-backs this year. And the Colorado Rockies, I mean, they're going to probably be in the basement of the NL West. That wouldn't surprise anyone. And after tonight's game, the D-backs are now 4-1 against the Colorado Rockies on the season. You want them to get that Game 3 victory and just at least secure that series win. I'll be okay if they roll over in Game 4. As long as you get that series win in Game 3, then that would actually be a 4-game winning streak for the D-backs after winning the series finale against the Boston Red Sox. If you won the first 3 games of the series against the Colorado Rockies, that would be a nice bounce back after seeing the offense struggle just a little bit against the Boston Red Sox. Not your typical explosion that we see from this D-backs offense. And then we didn't even mention him, but Zach Gallen, once again, the milkman delivered, because Zach Gallen was phenomenal in this game. It was like a ho-hum Zach Gallen performance. It wasn't the kind of game where I was like, oh my God, he is disgusting tonight. He is Cy Young Zach Gallen, a legend, a god amongst boys. But even with that being said, even though I didn't feel like it was an overwhelmingly dominant performance by Zach Gallen, he still gave you 6 innings of no earned run ball, 7 strikeouts, 2 walks. Like the box score will tell you it was an elite performance, but by the eye test, I think it was a great performance. I think it was still an all-star worthy performance. I just don't think it was one of those Zach Gallen performances where like, okay, is he going to get 12 strikeouts over 7 innings here with no earned runs and just maybe give up 2 hits, no walks? Like it wasn't one of those Zach Gallen performances, but overall, he still dominated. He still looked nasty. Corbin Carroll was the MVP of the night for sure, with Zach Gallen a close second. And now, to win the series, we're going to need Tommy Henry to come through in Game 3, and we're going to preview Game 3 of the series right here on the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast. But first, I want to talk to you guys about FanDuel. And unfortunately, I do not have my FanDuel overlay downloaded for my YouTube audience. Maybe I could download it real quickly. Here, let's see. Oh my God, I almost had it. Let's see. FanDuel Sportsbook. Here we go. Let's add the overlay for you guys, because I am on a new StreamYard account, so I don't have all my overlays uploaded, but thankfully I'm a quick cat and I already have it uploaded for my YouTube audience. So let me explain to you guys what FanDuel is, because it's time to make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. The reason why I love FanDuel is because they have these things called a same game parlay. When the Lakers were in season before they got swept by my not by my Denver Nuggets. The Lakers are my team. But before they got swept by the Denver Nuggets, my Los Angeles Lakers were my go-to team to do a same-game parlay because I was like, Lakers win, LeBron 25, AD 25, D-Lo a couple threes, and that usually felt pretty good and sometimes got me a little more money in my pocket. But now that the season's over, I'm not really betting too much, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't because of this great promotion, because there's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockdown and get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right. Let's get back into the podcast and let's preview game 3 against the Colorado Rockies because we got Tommy Henry on the mound going against the Nelson Lamet. And this is a big game for Tommy Henry because for the youngsters in the rotation, it's time to see what you're worth. This is time if you want to be a big league pitcher, if you want to be a starting rotation member, you got to perform right now because the Tommy Henrys of the world, the Ryan Nelsons of the world, the Brendan Pfatts of the world, and the Dre Jamesons of the world are all fighting for those rotation spots because I do think Davies is kind of locked into a rotation spot. I can't really see the D-backs move him out there. So that's 3 rotation spots for 4 youngsters. And Tommy Henry right now has a slight lead on a rotation spot because Brandon Pfaadt is in the minor leagues after struggling on the major league level. And Dre Jameson has not yet looked good as a rotation starter on the big league level this year. And he's been such a weapon as a long reliever. So Tommy Henry does have a little bit of a lead on a lockdown rotation spot. And he's been better than Ryan Nelson this season as well. So Tommy Henry has a big game ahead of him against the Colorado Rockies. And another good start could mean another week of salvation for Tommy Henry in the rotation, who has been pitching pretty well recently. His most recent start, or his most recent outing, because he made a bullpen appearance against the Red Sox, which was kind of weird. I wouldn't expect him to do that. But 1.1 innings pitched, 0 earned runs. And then 3 of the 4 previous start before that relief outing, he gave up 2 earned runs or less and pitched into at least the 6th inning in all of them. And no start this year has Tommy Henry given up more than 4 earned runs. So he's not someone that's going to have a big blow-up game. We've seen starts where Ryan Nelson gives up 5 earned runs or more. Even a guy like Zach Gallen has done that this season. But a guy like Tommy Henry, at least you're going to be in the ball game and potentially could be a quality start. And so you'd like to see that. Like we always say with Tommy Henry, he's not a high ceiling guy, but he is a high floor guy, which is basically the antithesis of what Madison Bumgarner was giving you in the rotation, which was no floor, no ceiling, and just going out there and giving up a ton of runs every day. You were just like, Madison Bumgarner, if you can at least eat 5 to 6 innings for us, I don't care if you give up 4 earned runs, but can you at least go 5? And a lot of times he couldn't do that. Tommy Henry, he might give up 3 to 4 earned runs, but he can still at least go 5 or 6 when that's being done. So I've been really impressed with Tommy Henry so far this season. Now, he hasn't been great with runners scoring position. He needs to be better in that area. Over a 300 average, over an 800 OPS in that scenario. But Tommy Henry is someone that's really good. That first time through the rotation, Tommy Henry is pretty solid in that area. That's probably those first 3 innings of a ball game, Tommy Henry is pretty solid. It's that second turn through the rotation where Tommy Henry has to tighten up a little bit, because that first time through the rotation, he's only given up a 208 average and a 734 OPS in his career. But the second time through the rotation, a 313 average and a 982 OPS. So if he can get through 2 turns of the rotation cleanly, look for the D-backs to really monitor his pitch count after that, because then he could get pulled at any time. Monitor whether he puts a guy on or gives up a base hit, because after he gets through 2 clean turns of the rotation, you feel like you have a huge win with Tommy Henry. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the D-backs pull him after just 2 turns. And I believe, let me see, I want to confirm that those are his I believe those are his stats for this season, his turns through the rotation. Let me just double check for y'all as I'm up on my baseball reference. So that was for this season, 2023. He's been really good through the first turn of a lineup, but that second turn through a lineup, that's where Tommy Henry really struggled. And it's a big improvement, because if you actually look at his career numbers, he was bad in the first turn through the rotation and the second time through the lineup. But so far this season, he's been able to settle down innings 1 through 3. It's innings 4 through 6 is where he really struggles. So if you get 2 clean turns through the lineup for Tommy Henry, you feel like you probably get a victory. And Tommy Henry in his career against the Colorado Rockies isn't terrible. Now, he isn't great either. His career numbers against the Rockies, he's given up 7 earned runs and 10.2 innings pitched. So you're not exactly impressed with that. That is a 5.91 ERA, but he's given up no home runs during that time, and he has 6 strikeouts. And so I feel like Tommy Henry against the Colorado Rockies team at Chase Field, I think Tommy Henry could have himself a decent day. He is typically better at home throughout his career, and the Colorado Rockies just have been so bad this year outside of Ryan McMahon because Tommy Henry is not very good against lefties. He's pretty good against righties so far this season. Only a 233 average and 752 OPS given up to righties, but against lefties, over a 350 average and over 1,000 OPS. And so when you look at that Colorado Rockies lineup, the only lefty that you really have to worry about is Ryan McMahon, who's also the best Colorado Rocky player going right now outside of Elias Diaz. And so if you can slow down a Ryan McMahon, you don't give him anything to pitch, there's really not too much you have to worry about from this Colorado Rockies offense. And then on the flip side, a guy like Dinelson Lamet just hasn't been good against the D-backs throughout his career. This has been really a pitcher that the D-backs have been able to take advantage of throughout Lamet's career because Lamet's career numbers against the D-backs, he's got a 6.94 ERA. He's given up 27 earned runs and 35 innings pitched, 8 home runs. And so this should be a nice matchup for the D-backs who really attack a Lamet and have another offensive explosion. And like I said, clinch the series. Don't leave it up to game 4 where you could potentially split the series against the Colorado Rockies. If you lose to the Boston Red Sox and then split the series against the Colorado Rockies, I think that's back-to-back bad series for a team that could potentially be second in the National League, in the next couple of days. And so if this D-backs team, like we always say, little tests, little check markers, go after Lamet in today's game and really put some runs on the board because Lamet in his career hasn't been good against his D-backs team, and he hasn't really been that good this season. Lamet has a 12.66 ERA so far this season, and really since that, what was it, like 2020, where he looked really good for the San Diego Padres? Yeah, in 12 starts in 2020, that was the best Lamet we've seen. Outside of the 2020 shortened season, Lamet really hasn't been that guy. He's also dealt with injuries, but so far this year, he hasn't started a game. He's been mostly a reliever. And as a reliever, he's given up 15 earned runs and 10.2 innings pitched. So we'll see how this start goes for Lamet. But I'm hoping his first start of the season, the D-backs just light him up and the Colorado Rockies decide never to put Lamet in the rotation ever again, especially not against a team that has owned Lamet throughout the entirety of his career. So hopefully the D-backs could put Lamet into retirement after game 3. Now let's talk about a little fun topic. I want to talk about this big trade that happened this past offseason because the D-backs traded away one of the pillars of their team, one of the young bright spots, someone that was a fan favorite, someone that you might have even said was arguably the biggest fan favorite. Maybe that's a stretch. Maybe it's not, but at least someone that had a soft spot in everyone's heart because of what we've seen him do in the minor leagues and then see him flash on the major league level. And that is Daulton Varsho, because as a prospect coming up, we knew his profile, what kind of offensive player could be. He's a guy that's behind the plate with 30-30 potential, someone that has explosive power from his bat, someone that has explosion with his legs. And we were able to see flashes of it last season. 27 home runs, 16 stolen bases, saw him turn into arguably the best defensive outfielder in all of baseball. It's like, what is the ceiling of a Daulton Varsho? Can he be just a dynamic offensive and defensive weapon? Is he a foundational piece of this D-backs team going forward? We know this D-backs team has a logjam in the outfield. These were the things we were saying to each other in the offseason with the Daulton Varshos, the Corbin Carrolls, the Jake McCarthy's, the Alec Thomas's. You're going to have to trade an outfielder, and who should it be? I was saying in the offseason, maybe trade a Alec Thomas for like a Jesus Luzardo. I thought McCarthy, Varsho, Corbin Carroll was the big three that I wanted to move forward with to have for the foreseeable future. And the D-backs decided to go in a different direction and trade away Daulton Varsho, who was, at the time of the trade, the best D-backs outfielder, because Jake McCarthy and Alek Thomas. Jake McCarthy's had a great offensive season last year, but even with that being said, Daulton Varsho is still better from that power standpoint, from the fact that he still stole bases as well. Maybe Jake McCarthy was a better pure raker than Daulton Varsho last year, but Daulton Varsho is a complete package. What he could do with his legs and the power component was probably had a better offensive season than Jake McCarthy. Of course, had better offensive season than Alek Thomas. And defensively, Daulton Varsho was graded as a better defensive player than Alek Thomas last season. And then Corbin Carroll, his sample size was just too small to say he was better than a Daulton Varsho. So among the four youngsters last season in the outfield, Daulton Varsho was probably, at least at that moment at the end of the season, the best one. And the D-backs decided to move on and trade him away in a surprise move and trade him to the Toronto Blue Jays. And typically when you trade a guy like Daulton Varsho away, you're probably expected to get back maybe a 1-for-1 swap. Maybe get back a comparable starting pitcher like a Pablo Lopez or something like that, right? I always bring up those Miami Marlins pitchers, but I don't think you would have expected to get back one of the top catching prospects in all of baseball, one of the top prospects, period, in all of baseball, and Gabriel Moreno, and get back a serviceable, good outfielder, Lourdes Gurriel. But since the trade went down the offseason, it has graced and aged beautifully. And now I have the question of, is that the greatest trade in Mike Hazen's era as the D-backs GM? Because Daulton Varsho so far this season with the Toronto Blue Jays just hasn't been that guy. And it's more first half struggles for Daulton Varsho, because we've seen this throughout the entirety of his career. Right now with the Blue Jays, he's batting around 200 with a below a 650 OPS. He has near double-digit home runs. He has more than 5 stolen bases. So he's having really just not that great of a season. He's got the power, he's still got the speed, but he's just not hitting consistently for average, and he's not getting on base enough. And this is something that we've seen from Daulton Varsho throughout the entirety of his career, because in his career so far, in the first half of the season, he's like a 212 hitter with a 653 OPS. And then in the second half of his career, he's like a 260 hitter with like over 800 OPS. So this is someone that definitely heats up in the second half of the season. So you still expect this year that Daulton Varsho could get better. But what we've seen so far from all the pieces in the trade, the D-backs have clearly won this trade because of the Daulton Varsho struggles. And then the fact a guy like Lourdes Gurriel, who's still only 29 years old, is having himself a career season, more home runs than a Daulton Varsho, over a 300 average, over a 900 OPS. And then Gabriel Moreno, he hasn't had that power component, but he's around a 300 hitter, can flat out rake, a contact machine, and he leads the majors in caught runner stealing. Over, I think it was like, I saw the stat today at the D-backs game, it was like 13 for 24. Moreno has thrown out runners attempting to steal against him this year. So when you take those two guys, I mean, straight up Gurriel has been better than Daulton Varsho this season, but Moreno and Gurriel together, two players back, not just better than Daulton Varsho, but like are playing at what their ceiling is for players, at least currently in their career. Like, I think Gabriel Moreno definitely has more to unlock, but at this point of his career, 70 games to his, into his professional major league career, if you tell me he's a 300 hitter and the best guy at throwing out runners in Major League Baseball, that's pretty close to where your ceiling can be in your first 70 games. Lourdes Gurriel, this is like his 7th year in baseball. He's batting like 320 with a 900 OPS. You could definitely say he's playing at his ceiling, or Daulton Varsho playing at his absolute worst or close to it. The D-backs and Mike Hazen have definitely fleeced the Toronto Blue Jays so far, and it makes me wonder, is this the best trade in the Mike Hazen era? I think it's probably too early to call. I think right now it's on pace to be the best trade in the Mike Hazen era. One, because the D-backs are rocking, and those two guys are critical pieces to what the D-backs are doing right now. But also, I think it's still too early. The sample size is still too small, and a trade like Zach Gallen for Jazz Chisholm could go down as a better trade. I think it's between those two trades as the best in the Mike Hazen era. Now, I do think Jazz Chisholm has been good for the Miami Marlins. He probably hasn't been Zach Gallen good, but he did look like an all-star in 2022. I think he's had major flashes on the major league level. I mean, in 2021, he had a near 2020 season as a full year as a rookie. I mean, his biggest issue is he just doesn't play enough games. He's always hurt. He's hurt again right now. And so if he can get healthy, I think when he's on the field, he's very good. I don't think he's as good as Zach Gallen, but it's at least a pretty close one-to-one swap. But right now, when we look at this 2-for-1 swap where the D-backs got two players way better than Daulton Varsho, that's why I would have it probably number one, considering how good the D-backs are this year, how much of an immediate impact they made, and just the contrast between those two players. But it's close with the Zach Gallen deal, and I want to see, more long-term. Does Lourdes Gurriel stay past this season? Is he a short-term piece that the D-backs hold on to? What kind of player does Gabriel Moreno develop into? Does Daulton Varsho turn it around and just turn into an all-star, consistent outfielder for the Toronto Blue Jays? These are real questions I have. You could also put the Eduardo Escobar trade, I guess, on this list. It wasn't terrible. It was a good trade in the Mike Hazen era, but I don't know if it should be on this tier of getting a Zach Gallen or getting a Moreno Lourdes Gurriel. The only reason it feels like the Daulton Varsho trade was better, not another reason why it feels like the Daulton Varsho trade was better, is because you did get two players in the deal. Like if I got Zach Gallen and I got like Andrew Chafin in the deal for Josh Chisholm, then of course, then that deal is even better than what it currently is when comparing it to this Daulton Varsho trade. But considering I got two guys that look like potential all-stars this season for Daulton Varsho, who does not look like an all-star level player currently, you can arguably say it's the best Mike Hazen trade during his era. I think it's probably too early to say, but I think it's definitely tracking in that direction. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Make your second listen of the day the Locked On MLB podcast with your boy Silly Baseball. Thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Put hashtag everydayer on YouTube if you listen every day in the comments section. Don't forget you can catch every D-backs pitch on their hometown broadcast when you download the Sirius XM app and search up Diamondbacks. And as always, come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage insight. Should hopefully be talking to Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.